I'm Dr. John Gartner.
And I'm Dr. Harry Segal.
Welcome to another session of Shrinking Trump.
Yes, this is our weekly show where we review the ways in which Trump has behaved over the past week, because we've been noting signs of early onset of dementia, as well as expressions of his malignant personality disorder. And each week we've been trying to help you, our listeners, as well as the media, to think about Trump in a more clinically sophisticated and accurate way. John?
Well, Trump crisscrossed the country this week, and everywhere that Donny went, the signs of his dementia were sure to follow. This was the week that I call Trump's dementia tour, because at every place that he stopped, and it's not that he does this all the time, but at every place that he stopped, he couldn't help but revealing at least one sign of cognitive decline. For example, in Detroit, and this is actually one of my favorites, while he was bragging about passing the dementia test, he actually evidenced his dementia when he pointed to the doctor who gave him the test and twice called him Ronnie Johnson instead of Ronnie Jackson. Can we see that tape?
I think you should take a cognitive test like I did. I took a cognitive test and I aced it. Dr. Ronnie Johnson. Does everyone know Ronnie Johnson, congressman from Texas? He was the White House doctor. And he said I was the healthiest president he feels in history. So I liked him very much.
You know, there's a lot of back and forth about people getting names wrong, right? You know, Biden got the name of the president of Mexico wrong, or the president of France wrong. But these aren't people that, you know, he's interacting with every day. Ronnie Jackson, aka Ronnie Johnson, is someone who's been a close ally, was his personal physician, the supplier of all his, illegal uppers and whatever, because he's Candyman Jackson. So whenever people needed stimulants, they came to him.
Not to mention a phony, optimistic medical report about how healthy Trump was.
Right. I mean, he loved people who love him. He's got the healthiest genes in anyone in 200 years. He could live to be 200, the healthiest president in history, and lied about his height, weight, heart disease, and cognitive functioning.
Well, can I just also add one more thing quickly? This is one of the only events that Trump held that was at night. Right? I mean, this was like in the early evening rather than the afternoon.
And the thing is, Trump really does comedy in the sense that he is a self-parody. He really writes his own Saturday Night Live cold opens, right? Couldn't you see a cold open with Trump going, I passed the cognitive test. I'm very cognitive. Actually, that's one of the things he once said. They say I'm cognitively deficient, but I'm not cognitive. And the person who knows it is Ronnie Johnson right there. Dr. Ronnie Johnson. I mean, he's actually writing a Saturday Night Live cold open. You just can say it out loud, and it's funny because it's a self-parody. It's becoming self-parody at this point. Anyway, what was really a grim self-parody was the behavior of Republican lawmakers when Trump came back to the Capitol. I mean, this is really a grim scene. He's returning to the scene of the crime where he came to overthrow the government. And now he's returning, and they're literally falling over themselves to genuflect and kiss his ring. How much were they genuflecting? Chip, can we see the next slide? House GOP moves to name U.S. coastal waters after Trump. That's right, folks. The waters surrounding the United States would now be named the Donald John Trump Exclusive Economic Zone. Okay. So take that in for a moment. We're renaming all of the coastal waters of the United States the Exclusive Trump Economic Zone.
They also want to name the $500 bill and put Trump's picture on it. And what's really frightening about this is that if he is elected president and the Congress is also elected as Republicans, he could sign that into law.
You see, if he's reelected, you will experience what it's like to live in North Korea, because there'll be giant pictures of the dear leader, 1,000 feet tall, dominating public squares. I mean, that's what these fascists do. He's already doing it. He probably, will pass a law to get himself on Mount Rushmore. But the point is, their picture is always with you. Their image is always with you. Chip, could we have the Pelosi's daughter quote? Okay. But while they're genuflecting to him, according to one Republican congressman, he acted like a drunk uncle at a reunion. Here's a quote of some of the ways he behaved. He shared a bizarre anecdote about Speaker Emeritus Nancy Pelosi's daughter, whom he called a wacko, saying that she had told him if things were different, Nancy and I would be perfect together. There's an age difference, though. He's 24 years older than his wife, who is actually younger than Pelosi's daughter. So just so you understand this, because it's probably very confusing, he says that Nancy Pelosi's daughter said that she and Trump would really be perfect together, but he's talking about her as if her name is Nancy. So it's unclear whether he wants to sleep with Nancy Pelosi or Nancy Pelosi's daughter or both of them, but he thinks they want him, is the point. And this is what he's talking about when he's bringing the lawmakers together for some agenda to rule the country. Speaking on behalf of all of her sisters, Christine Pelosi said it was a lie and that Trump had a, quote, deranged obsession with Pelosi. Yes, and he also called Wisconsin a horrible city. Because why are we talking about this? Why are we talking about this? Because he doesn't have any frontal lobes left, okay? Because there's a deterioration in his frontal lobes that are causing him to become disinhibited and lose his executive functioning. That's why he's saying Milwaukee's a terrible city, and he's talking about his sexual fantasies about Nancy Pelosi and Nancy Pelosi's daughter when he's at a political meeting.
No, absolutely. And one thing that, John, you've been thinking about, and so have I, which is when Trump is in a very safe space, let's say in front of 10,000 people cheering him, or in an interview on a Saturday morning with Fox and Friends Saturday group, he can be fairly organized and effective. But if he is agitated, you can imagine walking into the Capitol needing to herd the Republicans to support him. And what I understand is that one reason why he said he was going to support Larry Hogan for Senate in Maryland was because McConnell and Johnson took him aside and threatened him and said, you've got to stop undermining people that could bring us the majority in the House and in the Senate. So he was not in a safe place. He was in a place that was kind of risky. And that's why I think we started to hear things that he wouldn't come up in a softball interview with friends.
That's a really good point. So he became more disorganized under stress, which really does make sense.
That would be my hypothesis anyway. Keep going.
When we realize what shocking lack of executive function he showed at the Capitol, you know who really doesn't have a high tolerance for lack of executive functioning? Executives. The CEOs had a roundtable meeting with Trump. Ex-presidents was, quote, meandering and doesn't know what he's talking about. Several CEOs said that Trump was remarkably meandering and could not keep a straight thought and was all over the map. Several CEOs said this. CNBC's Andrew Sorkin reported Friday on CNBC's Squawk Box. I'm just going to skip to the bottom. The same CEOs who were struck by Trump's lack of focus walked into the meeting being Trump supporter-ish or thinking that they might be leaning in that direction, Sorkin said, but afterwards they were thinking twice about it. And he said this on the air on Squawk Box as well. So in other words, people who, yeah, sure, they want low taxes, they want corruption, they want lack of regulation, they want all those things, and they're willing to be pigs at the trough, but they do understand as people who are chief executive officers that you need executive functioning even to run a corrupt organization.
Well, I heard another detail from that, which was they were asking him about corporate tax reductions, and he said, "How about 20%?" And they asked him why that number, and he said, purportedly said, "It's a good round number," and that did not go over well. They didn't hear a financial justification for his ideas because he has no policies, because he can't think about policies. The only thing he can do is run these slogans about how dumb Joe Biden is, how weak the country is, how dangerous it is, and how he's going to make it all better. And as we'll see in a few more clips, he does that extremely well. It's so dangerous. But the moment you push him on policy, he has nothing to say.
Right. No, he really is like the scarecrow. I mean, there's just nothing. There's no ideas. It's just stuffing. I mean, what they're really saying, he can't put an idea together. So they understand that even if he's with them, if he can't put an idea together, he's not going to be able to function effectively, even if he's pushing their policies. Well, then this brings us to the ranting in Racine, which actually, as Harry says, was actually a very effective rally.
Very effective rally.
As we showed some of the other things that he's doing that are effective, one of the things that he does so well is he puts himself in very comfortable environments where he's not challenged, where his grandiosity is stroked, and he's energized, and then he riffs, and people like it and love it, and he gets into this feedback loop. But I did want to show some of the slips again, because I'm making this point that at every stop, okay, and here's the point, there's a lot of these clips on social media. I think Dr. Kramer might talk about these, that they can be distorted, really, right? Because they can be cherry picking the most dysfunctional moments. And as you're pointing out, he has very functional moments when he's being very articulate and very powerful. But these things are telltale signs, right? They're tells. They're things that are not just gaffes. They are things that are associated with signs and symptoms of illness that we know about. And if they actually are signs and symptoms of a progressive dementia or dementing process or cognitive decline, then as I predicted when we started this show 2 months ago, he will continue to get worse. He will continue to show these symptoms more and more and more. And so we used to have funny gaffe clips that pulled together his gaffes for over a period of months. Now we only need 1 week to see the same number of gaffes. So that's one reason I am sort of documenting these, even though it may seem repetitive. So let's start with the first clip.
Joe Biden, this guy is just the worst. Joe Biden, the worst president in the history of our country, will be a fading nightmare. He'll be I have fading memory, but I think, do you mind if I change it? He will be a fading nightmare. He's been a nightmare for this country.
So he says I have fading memory.
Fading. Yeah, it's really something. He's really actually speaking about he's actually aware of his cognitive slippage, isn't he? That's the first time I've heard him actually refer to it.
I actually have no memory, but so what? Let's just call it a nightmare. And but he calls him Joe Bride. I just want to point that out. Okay, and he just doesn't seem to be able to get straight who is president of the United States. He just
always about the
can't
president.
seem to get it straight. I mean, 8 times he said on camera, Obama's president. How often on times he's not on camera does he think Biden is not president, or some Joe Obama's president, or who knows what he's thinking? And he literally can't get it straight. So it's just amazing that someone's running for president who doesn't know who is the president of the United States.
Well, these moments of slippage are revealing, because he is extremely competitive and feels tremendously injured by the loss to Biden last time. Tremendously.
Right. And so I think you make a good point. Things that are emotionally disorganizing for him, especially things that have to do with defeat and submission, and especially anything to do with a president, right, automatically disorganizes him in a way where emotionally and psychodynamically, so that then George cognitively derails him.
Right. He's more popular than George Washington. He's done more for Black people than Abraham Lincoln. So it doesn't have to be current or recent presidents. It can be any president.
He has to compete with all of them. He has to compete with them. He has to beat them all.
Yes, he does.
Actually, one point he was talking about, like, I'm probably the most popular president since George Washington. And then I remember thinking, no, he won't let that stand. He's going to have to amend this. Well, actually, I'm more popular than George Washington. I knew he couldn't let George Washington win. Yeah, but okay, Chip, go ahead. Show the next tape. Oh, before you show the next tape, I just want to say we've been talking about his, phonemic paraphasias, where he takes non-English words and then distorts them. Here, it's a little bit hard to know how to characterize this, because he made up, he has to make up funny names for people. To make fun of George Stephanopoulos, he likes to call him George Slopadopoulos. But the problem is, he's now going to commit a phonemic paraphasia with his own made-up word. So you'll see what I mean. Let's hear the tape.
And ABC, they have George Stopalopoulos. I call him Slopadopoulos. George Stopadopoulos. I said, George, I've had you up to here. You got to start telling the truth.
Incredible.
Morama. I mean,
you know, he gets the name right. You're right. He gets his nickname wrong, right? Then does another slip right at the end, and then makes a joke about how short Stephanopoulos is,
right,
as a way of compensating for having just showed a slippage in his cognitive functioning. It's really extraordinary. He moves
really good point.
very, very fast when he makes a mistake. He's on it, sort of.
Yeah, it's the show must go on. You know, and this one I'm just going to show this for a second. Citizen Zip. I just want to point out that Donald Trump cannot go a week without a phonemic paraphasia. Last week we didn't have time in the show, but it was Hispanican. I just want to say my streak is running. Okay, I am undefeated. Right. Okay, every week. Okay, he cannot. You know, Harry, a week without a phonemic paraphasia is like a week without dementia.
The fast track to rapid citizenship.
Rapid citizenship. Not going to say anything else about that. Yeah. Right. And then, well, just listen to this one. I don't even know how to characterize it.
Joe Biden's granting mass thinker. He's going to formally grant a mass amnesty to millions of illegal aliens that came into our country.
So again, just sort of in the middle of a sentence, he couldn't complete a word or a sentence. Mass think it. Mass. Joe Biden is granting mass think it. It's saying, but he wants to say about mass amnesty, granting mass amnesty, but he can't say the sentence. He can't say it.
No, and then he pulls out of it, and then finishes the expression, which is, you know, one of these vicious attacks on Biden, now saying he's letting millions and millions of people in, the whole thing that he does. He pulls out of these tailspins very quickly, sometimes in a second, but we catch them. And all of you should be catching it, because he looks like he's functioning higher than he actually is.
Right. Absolutely. And I'm going to do one more piece of videotape, and then I know, Harry, you have a couple of video pieces that you wanted to show. This doesn't really have anything to do with his cognitive decline, and yet I mention it every single week. Why? Because I'm a Jew, and because in the Holocaust, they murdered my people. And I have said time and time again that Trump really is the American Hitler, and that immigrants are the new Jews, and he is fomenting hatred towards them. And he's already announced he's going to put them in concentration camps en masse. I just want you to see how he is, and Harry mentioned correctly that he was very effective in connecting with the crowd in Racine, and I haven't showed you any of those moments. Look at how he whips up the crowd in terms of their hatred for immigrants.
To the United States of America, thank you very much. No. Who can believe that they allow this to happen to our country?
So send them back, just like lock her up, chanting these authoritarian slogans. Now we want to look at another way the news gets distorted by the right-wing press. I've spoken to a lot of people, and I'm sure you have too, who say, look, I'm not trying to, start a fight with you or anything, but I mean, come on, Biden's really, we see him on video wandering around looking confused. I mean, he's lost it, man. I mean, that's just the fact, Jack. Okay, well, this is the kind of video that they're seeing. So Chip, if you could show us the first parachute video. So this video went viral. Okay, millions of people saw this video. All right, and aside from the fact that we'll see it's distorted in a moment, I just want to point out that White House correspondent told me that Biden has the worst advance team of any president he's ever seen. Okay, because if he saw Biden at the Key Bridge, and he said if Trump were there, he'd have a dais with bunting. He'd be making it a big brouhaha. He'd come on the stage dancing. They let Biden off across a parking lot. Okay. This asphalt black parking lot. And he just had to wander across the parking lot to the bridge where the workmen were hammering with jackhammers. I mean, they had set up nothing. So he looked like an old man wandering on a bridge, because that's what he was, because nobody was orienting the event. Anyway, let's see that an expanded videotape. He looks like he's a man wandering in the field, waving to no one. Now let's see the unedited tape. He's giving the thumbs up to the French airman who has just landed after parachuting. Let's see the larger tape so you understand the event that they were at. So in other words, it's a ceremonial event. All these people are parachuting down. All the G8 leaders are clapping for them. Of course, they didn't set them up on a dais. They are just wandering around in a big field. But in other words, it was a ceremonious event. And, he was part of that event. And yeah, in fact, the person he was giving the thumbs up to was the guy with the French flag, and he was standing next to Macron. So yeah, he wanted to say hello to the French, acknowledge the French parachuter.
No, it's there's so much distortion going on in this campaign. And the Republicans, the New York Post, of course, is a Republican paper,
of course,
are very, very effective at exploiting these things. And Biden, in this case, it was a totally natural thing for him to do. He's very, very social. He wanted to go over and give a thumbs up. But look how easy it is to take things out of context.
Yeah, exactly. Well, Harry, there's been some bad news. Let's look at the Washington Post again. Donald Trump, potential future oldest president, turns 78. There was a quote here that I want to bring your attention to. If we can look at the next picture. The risks for the two of them, meaning Trump and Biden, is about the same for demonstrating some degree of cognitive decline over the next 4 to 5 years, said Joel Kramer, the director of the Neuropsychology program at UCSF Memory and Aging Center. Harry, when I saw that quote, I got mad.
How mad were you, Johnny?
I was so mad that I wrote a very strongly written email to Dr. Kramer. And I had some choice words for Dr. Kramer, and here's what they were. Dear Dr. Kramer, I'm a colleague, a former part-time assistant professor of psychiatry at Johns Hopkins, and the co-host of the podcast, Shrinking Trump. I was very disturbed by your quote in the Washington Post, quote, the risk for the two of them is about the same for demonstrating some degree of cognitive decline over the next 4 to 5 years. I would like to know what evidence you have for that statement. Are you simply basing it on their age? Is this your way of simply trying to offer the type of no opinion we've come to routinely expect from the medical community? Because you're actually publicly offering a medical prognosis without examining either client, which I believe would qualify as a violation of the Goldwater rule, which you claim to adhere to, although I do not. Have you examined the film in which Trump evidences phonemic paraphasias, semantic paraphasias, tangential thinking, confabulation, perseveration, palalia, and other disordered syntax? Dr. Vince Greenwood conducted a study in which he measured those symptoms in both Biden and Trump speeches. Below is the link to his article, and the picture of his graph is attached. We will be discussing your statement on our show, and I wanted to offer you the opportunity to comment. I will read whatever you reply on the air, or better yet, we invite you to appear on our show and defend what I believe to be your irresponsible public statement. That's John Gartner, PhD. In fact, I was ready to award Dr. Kramer the coveted Dr. Phil Award for the most unethical mental health professional of the week. But I was wrong.
Yes.
I was wrong. And I would have been wrong to attack Dr. Kramer, and I would have had to apologize, and I still would have felt bad about it.
And it wouldn't be the first time you'd have done that.
True enough. So it's always great when there's a near miss. So let's, to my surprise, Dr. Kramer responded with a gracious letter. He said, "Hi, John. Thanks for reaching out. Happy to comment and even be on the show. That quote in the article was simple epidemiology. Older folks are statistically at greater risk of multi-cause cognitive decline than younger folks. What never made it into the article were all my other remarks that I suspect are more aligned with your perspective. I emphasized that chronological age itself is not enough to presume anything about someone's cognitive ability. Also, while Biden's verbal gaffes get all the press, he has an established history of a developmental language disorder, stuttering, and that Trump's gaffes are more likely driven. Trump's gaffes, I'm reading this again. Trump's gaffes are more likely driven by disordered thinking, and that while cognitive ability is an important criterion for carrying out the duties of the presidency, other characteristics like empathy, moral compass, commitment to democratic principles, and wisdom are crucial as well. Best, Joel." So what I see here is that Dr. Kramer was quoted out of context. Okay, he wasn't making a definitive statement that they have equal risk for cognitive decline. They left out the basis for the statement, which is on the basis of their age, which of course is kind of obvious because they're almost the same age. So on the basis of their age, there wouldn't be a basis for making a differing prediction. But in the entirety of his views and the balance of his comments that he made in the interview, he was saying the opposite, that the men are quite different, that Biden has a stuttering disorder, and so he has a tendency towards gaffes, whereas Trump's gaffes seem to be suggesting a thought disorder. This is what he tells me he told the reporter, but it's not what the reporter wrote in the newspaper. So we're going to take Dr. Kramer up on his gracious offer, and he has cleared space in his schedule to come and talk with us, and we're very grateful. Dr. Kramer, I should mention, is a professor of neuropsychology and neurology at UCFF, and he's the director of neuropsychology and the memory aging program there.
Yeah, it's great to have him on.
I think the message that came through, I would almost call it quoting out of context, because the message that people got is A does equal B. And I don't think that was the totality of your observations and message. So tell me if I got any of this. And Rachel Maddow always says, tell me if I got this wrong. She always gets it right. I probably got it wrong.
Yeah. No, you got it right. I mean, basically with the comment about their similar risk for cognitive decline is simple epidemiology. I mean, we know from tons of epi studies and that, by the time you're around 80, just look at the prevalence of various kinds of cognitive impairment. Probably 5 or 6% of people in that age group have a cognitive decline significant enough to warrant this syndromic label of dementia. And, probably, and again, the estimates vary depending on how you do the study and how you define things, but maybe, 10, 12, 14% have some milder stages of cognitive difficulty, but not to the point of being dementia. So that's all that was saying, is that on the basis of their age, epidemiologically, prevalence incident rates are obviously the same for both. But that, the two of them are very, 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 very different.
Could you describe that difference for us?
Yeah, well, also let me preface my remarks because I can wear two different hats here. I can wear the hat of a concerned citizen, a concerned, observant citizen, and I can wear the hat as a scientist clinician who's been studying typical aging and neurodegenerative diseases for 4 decades. Let me first put on my citizen hat because I think it provides some context here. When you're listening to all these video snippets, you don't really need to be a scientist to be able to have some judgments about is the person I'm seeing in this video clip, be it Biden or Trump, is that the kind, am I seeing the kinds of behaviors that I want in a leader? Am I seeing the kind of linearity that I want to see in a leader? Am I seeing the degree of honesty and integrity? Am I seeing the kind of empathy and compassion that I think is so important in a US president? Am I hearing the commitment to democracy, the humility that comprises the kind of character I would like to see occupying the Oval Office? You don't need to be a scientist or a clinician to be able to come to some very cogent decisions about that. And I certainly encourage everyone to go through that process, even before you get to the policy distinctions.
One of the things you told me when we spoke is that when you spoke to actually this reporter and also Joel Achenbach, whose article we savaged a couple of weeks ago, nothing to do with you, Dr. Kramer, because he said both men evidenced word salad. And word salad is a formal diagnostic term that we use for dementia and for schizophrenia. And so we demanded a retraction because while we have given many clips, as you call them, or evidences of Trump speaking with word salad, I have not seen a clip of Biden speaking with word salad, and I challenged the Washington Post to provide one. And if they couldn't, that they should retract that statement. So it's interesting to me that you spoke to Joel Achenbach for that article. I don't remember if you were quoted or not. But
it wasn't for that article. He and I have had some conversations in the past.
Okay. But what you said is well, I just want to finish. But what you said was that when you spoke to both reporters, you felt that there was more signs of impairment in Trump in terms of the sort of thought disorder things that you were describing in email, or at least more worrisome signs in Trump than in Biden, that you were seeing a big distinction there. And that both reporters agreed with you in the discussion, which is interesting because both reporters' articles under their byline said the opposite. Their byline article quoted in the Post said A equals B, when what you're saying is in your discussion, in your interview, you both times were saying A does not equal B, and the reporters were agreeing that A does not equal B, but the Washington Post published both times that A equals B. So the only logical conclusion that I can draw from that is there are forces above the writers who are insisting that the message be A equals B.
Obviously I can't speak to that because I have no idea what goes on behind the scenes.
Well, Dr. Kramer, you were about to you talked about your view as a citizen. Now you're going to then move on to your view as a clinician, researcher, scientist.
Right. So with that hat on, it's, we all know that one of the primary symptoms of COVID is coughing. So you see someone who's coughing, do you automatically assume that they have COVID? Obviously not. What you think is this person needs to be evaluated and get to the better understanding of why there's coughing, and is this COVID or is it something else? Could it be something worse? Is it something more benign? So that's the tack I take as a clinician and scientist, that what these video clips do is generate hypotheses about what might be going on, but obviously I'm not going to make any clinical inferences, because what needs to happen before clinical inferences are made is a very good, in-depth, multidisciplinary clinical evaluation. And if the people surrounding the candidates notice change, and again, this is all about change. Change is what should be concerning in a geriatric population. If they're seeing changes and they really care and love this person, they will initiate this kind of in-depth multidisciplinary evaluation. Has there been significant changes in either of these candidates? It's very difficult to really tease that apart based on selected video snippets. We know that baseline, and you can go back and listen to Biden's debates when he was like in 2008. He's, as we know, he's been a lifelong stutterer. He's struggled to clearly and cleanly articulate some words. He stumbles. This is not unusual, and it continues to happen. Does it happen a little bit more? Again, I haven't listened to enough videotapes to do any kind of quantitative analysis. You go back and listen to Trump's verbiage 10 years ago, and he rambled 10 years ago. He was extraordinarily self-referential way back then. He struggled with being truthful way back then. So to what degree has there been a significant change?
Well, actually, people who worked with him in the White House, multiple people are saying he's not the same man he was 4 years ago. And actually, somebody just came out with a book today, Ramin Sadudo. After he interviewed him 6 times, he didn't recognize him, he said. So, I mean, people who are informants are noticing these changes and reporting on them. And
yeah, and I go back to, because again, the differential is very broad. Why is someone changing? And while for a 78-year-old, you have 2 reflexive hypotheses. One is that there is an underlying neurodegenerative process, and the host of neurodegenerative diseases is quite long, but in a 78-year-old, clearly one of the things at the top of the list is Alzheimer's disease, but there are other age-associated syndromes that need to be considered. Cerebrovascular disease, again, the older you are, the greater risk you have of cerebrovascular disease.
Right.
And, so these are things that really needed to be evaluated, not only to be fair to the individual, but to be fair to everyone around him. And in this case, given the visibility of the position, we're talking about all of us.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Dr. Kramer. We're going to let you go. I know you have an appointment at 1:00. I really appreciate your coming in, and also appreciate. I didn't have a chance to read your gracious response, but I'm glad that I'm glad that I didn't say bad things about you.
No, me too.
Yeah, I know.
You would have had to eat those words.
I know, but I would have eaten them, but I still would have felt bad because, once you say something bad, even the retraction doesn't really make up for it. I was going to give you the Dr. Phil Award, the coveted Dr. Phil Award for the most unethical mental health professional of the week. But now I've decided that you are ethical. It is the Washington Post whose ethics I question. But thank you so much for coming.
Thanks,
in.
Dr. Kramer. Great
to meet you both again.
Well, I think Dr. Kramer was very cautious. He didn't want to, make any statements. He was actually more tentative on the air than he was when we spoke and in his email. But I think the main point is not what he feels comfortable saying. I totally appreciate his position that he wants to say he would evaluate him and doesn't want to draw any conclusions. But I'm just trying to make a simple arithmetic point. A equals B or A does not equal B. Okay.
Right.
And the A equals B is the misinformation that we're getting from the mainstream media. And so if this doctor spoke for 20 minutes with someone, a writer who agreed with him about there being more troubling signs that might make it more urgent to have an evaluation without biasing it or saying anything political, that was the import of what he said. And they snipped it down to 8 words. Basically, not even with the qualifier. He said, based on their age, they have equal risk, which is really almost an obvious statement. But they left it with the impression that his total clinical evaluation, knowing all that he could see about the men, was that they seemed to be on about the same starting line as far as any cognitive decline is concerned. And I'm just saying that it's interesting that he spoke about that to both writers, and both writers agreed with him, and both writers wrote the opposite under their byline. So were they lying to Dr. Kramer when they spoke to him? Were they planning to misuse his quote? Or was someone above them saying, yeah, that's nice, but the way we're going to slate it is this. We're going to trim the quote here. I think that there are, and this sounds paranoid, like I'm speaking from the bunker of pirate radio, like some right-wing gun nut. But I think there is a conspiracy at the corporate level to keep this out of the press. Keep this misinformation going.
I have an alternate theory. You may be right, John, but we saw Dr. Dr. Kramer's caution in giving a diagnosis based on public videos, because it leaves you liable. I mean, it's not, you and I are taking a big risk by coming on this show every week and talking, not definitively, but arguing strongly for a diagnosis of Trump, not just his what seems to me to be an onset of cognitive decline, but also his severe personality disorder. But the mainstream press doesn't want to come out and label Trump with this disorder because they don't have an evaluation of him. But Biden is old and Trump is old. And so they're just kind of putting it out there that they're both old. I think it's cowardly. I don't think it helps the public. And there's a reason why, you and I and other people making this point are getting attention on social media.
Right.
But
you don't need an expert to tell us they're both old.
Yeah, but the mainstream press, I don't think it's a conspiracy to protect Trump. I think it's a decision not to go with a diagnosis that they can't certify, that they can't say has been done.
And we also have to say, Dr. Kramer's on the faculty of a medical school. A lot of people who are on the faculties of medical schools don't want to come on this show or don't want to make statements because you'll be prosecuted for breaking the Goldwater rule by the medical school. I know someone who lost their, not the professorship, but they were basically didn't get promoted because of it. So we've had a lot of ex-professors of psychiatry on this show who are retired who say, like, oh, what can they do to me? I'm 75 years old, Anyway, but I do appreciate Dr. Kramer for coming on. Well, actually, so some news was made today on the Trump cognitive front. An author, Ramin Saduda, has come out with a book, The Apprentice in Wonderland. He's actually the co-editor of Variety magazine. And he's reporting on his experiences with Trump. Unlike us, he has examined the patient and he is reporting on what he has observed. He is in psychiatry what we would call an informant. Okay, let's see the cover from People magazine where his article is reported out today. Donald Trump has, quote, severe memory issues, end quote, says author who interviewed him at length. Quote, he couldn't even remember me. Journalist Ramin Saduda, who spoke with Trump 6 times for his new book, claims that the former president, quote, had a vacant look on his face, trying to remember him during a follow-up interview. And let's look at the next slide. Donald Trump had severe memory issues, Saduda said. As the journalist who spent the most time with him, I had to say he couldn't remember things. He couldn't even remember me. Saduda said that they spoke for an hour in May 2021, and when they reunited a few months later for a follow-up conversation, Trump had a vacant look on his face and seemingly didn't recall the first interview. And actually, he's been all over TV. We may have him on the show today. He was scheduled to be here. Instead, he thought CNN was more important. So, if you're going to take that kind of attitude, no, we're actually trying to reschedule him. So he may or may not be tacked on to the end of the show. We don't know whether we're going to be speaking with him or not. So we don't know how to set up this conversation. Now, what's interesting is on CNN today, he said that Trump didn't just have a blank look, like he didn't recognize him. He said overtly, I don't recognize you. He said, don't you remember? We had an interview. We spoke one-on-one for several hours. And he said, I don't remember you. I just think that's important to add. But this is so interesting. So this is the defense that the Trump team made of why Trump might have forgotten. Quote, President Trump was aware of who this individual was throughout the interview process. But this, quote, writer, I'm not sure why writer is in quotes since he is a professional writer, writing a book about Trump, is a nobody. He's a nobody, an insignificant. So, of course, he never made an impression, Chung told People in a statement. After recognizing the importance of The Apprentice and its significant cultural impact on a global scale, this, quote, writer has now chosen to allow Trump derangement syndrome to rot his brain like so many other losers whose entire existence revolves around Donald Trump.
Oh, boy. No, they're just so awful, and
So
they're really vicious. This is the way that pro-Trump people speak. Even his fans speak this way.
right, even his acolytes, whoever this little press person Chung is.
Yeah.
But here's the thing: they don't deny that he didn't remember him. Right?
No,
the
they said
explanation. No, look. This makes perfect sense. Okay? The explanation is he's a nobody. So if somebody's a nobody, if they're invisible, okay, if somebody was invisible and I didn't see them, how could I remember them? Because they don't exist. They're nobody. They're invisible. Wait a minute.
They're insignificant.
No.
They're not important.
Yeah,
why would you remember someone unimportant you spent several hours with?
Several hours bragging about The Apprentice. He talks about the fact that Trump lit up when he talked about The Apprentice. The only thing that made him happy after losing the election is he loves The Apprentice. He spent hours talking to him about The Apprentice. He said they watched videotape of The Apprentice together. Okay. And he didn't remember him.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because he's a nobody. That's obviously the explanation. And also he's a loser whose brain has been rotted by Trump derangement syndrome. The fact that Trump is on tape saying that he doesn't remember him because he probably had the tape. It's still his rotten brain, his brain rotted with Trump derangement syndrome. That is the problem. Right. There was some tape I think you wanted to show us, Harry.
Yes, I spent some time watching Trump's rally in Racine, Wisconsin, and we showed you some other clips from it. It's actually Trump incredibly effective. I watched the whole hour and a half, and I get this dread because Trump can get around people who realize how disturbed he is at the level of personality, how he's declining at the level of cognition. And if he gets enough people to vote for him in significant states, he's back in power with all the vitriol and the viciousness and the extraordinary number of lies. I really was waiting to hear one truthful thing in this rally, and there wasn't, because it's all, as we called last week, borrowed from Nicole Wallace, Earth 2, where there's this whole other narrative of reality where Trump won the election in 2020, where what went on in New York wasn't a real trial, but it was just Joe Biden, this brilliant mastermind, punishing him, but also an idiot who can't put two sentences together, who's ruined the country, who's let in millions and millions and millions of people. He lies constantly. So it's very disturbing. In fact, he even said that there was $440 million raised after his conviction. There was 110. Everything is inflated. Everything's a lie, but very effective. At the end of Racine, he talks about something that had happened the week before in Wildwood, New Jersey, where Trump claimed he had 110,000 people in Wildwood, New Jersey, the most ever seen there, estimated actually at 60,000, generously. And he talks about how his wife didn't like his performance and wondered why he seemed to be wandering off at the end, not knowing where he was going. And Trump merely explains, simply says, I was imitating Joe Biden who walks into walls. So I want you to first hear this description. It's remarkable. And then we're going to show you the end of the New Jersey rally. Chip?
But I said to my wife, Vivek, I said, our great first lady, she's our great, people like our first lady. So I said, honey, I'll tell you, it was unbelievable. How good was it? It was unbelievable. The crowd, nobody's ever seen a crowd. That broke every record in New Jersey history. Nobody's ever seen 100, and I don't have a guitar. Don't forget, Elvis had a guitar. I don't have a guitar. I have nothing. I stand up here by myself. Terrible. But all these people, I said, how great? Tell me how great. She said, well, it was okay. I said, what do you mean okay? It was phenomenal. No, but your hair didn't look good. And then she said, the killer of all killers. She said, and what happened? You couldn't find your way off the stage. They showed you walking into walls. So the fake news had me walking into walls when I was just imitating Biden because he walks into walls. I don't know. You got to live with it. You got to live with it. That's why we call them the fake. That's why we call them the fake news. Every time the radical left Democrats, Marxists, communists, and fascists.
All right. So let me just take this apart a little bit because it's kind of fascinating. First of all, Melania has not been showing up for almost anything. And she certainly stayed away from the so-called hoax trial where, his infidelity to her while she was pregnant with her son was going on. She has not been in almost anything because I'm assuming she doesn't want to be part of this campaign. Certainly his daughter and son-in-law have nothing to do with this campaign, right? So because Melania hasn't been showing up, Trump is telling a story about her to almost make her present, right? I talked to my wife and I asked her, how did it go? Then he lies about the New Jersey crowd size, of course, the greatest in history, because everything's the greatest in history. And what's interesting is he makes Melania into a kind of critical wife. It wasn't so great. What do you mean? This may be a real dynamic between them, by the way. And she says, right? She says, your hair didn't look good, and it looked like you were walking off into walls. Now, let's remember that the event he's talking about occurred several weeks before. So I went back and I found the end of the Wildwood rally, and we can watch him walking off the stage because his hair wasn't showing. Second of all, he's saying goodbye to people, and he wanders on the stage. And the door is here. He goes past it and seems to be trying to get through, and then turns around and heads to the exit. That was picked up by people saying that he was confused. So what he did was he was doing cleanup on aisle 2. So in this next rally, he was saying, "You remember
imitating Biden? He was doing a Biden imitation.
Yeah,
that
he was.
He decided to do Biden.
The fake news just did it again.
Yeah,
it wasn't there at all. He lies so much that there really isn't any reality or truth coming out of his mouth, frankly. And I'm still hoping that he will do that debate next Thursday night, because it will be at 9:00 at night and there'll be no audience. And he's going to have to perform, and we'll see what he does and how he's able to keep himself together.
And also how much Biden takes advantage of the openings that he offers him. I think it's really important that Biden hammer him on every front. I mean, as a felon, as a rapist, as someone who tried to overthrow the government, as in every way, he should just keep aggressively hammering him. But he should also point out when he's not making sense. And when he's sounding thought disordered and demented, he should point it out and actually make fun of it, or at least expose it, viciously, shine light on it. But also don't let Trump be more aggressive. Don't let Trump keep interrupting him. He'll just interrupt him with a diarrhea of lies, but it'll make him look more dominant. So if he is compos mentis on that given evening, Biden has to make sure that he interrupts the interrupter. The line that I remember best from the last debate was, "Will you shut up, man?" That's the line that was most powerful because he was interrupting the interrupter. So he has to not let Trump out-dominate him, and he has to pound him on his weaknesses.
Yeah, and next week, we're going to have a special edition of our show, If the Debate Goes Through, which we will film the day after so we can look at the clips and analyze them. We have a very special guest who will be with us. And so that show will drop probably Saturday afternoon instead of Friday. But we're looking forward to seeing it. I think it may be the most crucial event of this campaign season.
All right. Well, I guess we're ready for a shrink wrap. So, Harry, what did we learn today?
Oh, we learned a great deal, I think, which is we're expanding our sense of how Trump is able to create a reality with his audience. He does it through lies. He does it through all of that energy. And as you pointed out, the more comfortable he feels, the better he is, even while he's showing phonemic paraphasias, even though he gets confused. It doesn't matter, because he creates a connection with the audience and a reality that won't be challenged as long as he's only performing in safe situations like rallies or like softball interviews with very, very partisan people like Dr. Phil.
Right. And yet when a real author meets with him, he witnesses the cognitive decline. He can see it up front. So when an honest interviewer actually reflects Trump's mental state, what he sees is someone in cognitive decline, but they are basically using smoke and mirrors. And, it really is like the Wizard of Oz. I keep saying I want on my gravestone for it to say he was Toto, because Trump is projecting this gigantic Wizard of Oz image, right, that all these people are responding to. But I'm just going, ruff, ruff, and trying to pull back the curtain and expose the dementing man behind the curtain, who is just brilliant at presenting this image, but really is an empty vessel.
And remember, he also has a severe personality disorder. So he has to be better than every president, everyone on the planet. He can never be wrong. If he's called out for being wrong, it's fake news. And listen, it's not just reporters. It was the CEOs who met with him. It was people, staff members in Congress who last week were reporting out these bizarre things that he said. So the less comfortable Trump is, the worse he does. And I hope that the nation will get a chance to see that. We'll see.
All right. Well, thank you for joining us for another session of Shrink Wrap and Shrinking Trump.
And we'll see you next week. Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.